This week on The Record, partisan power play. Missouri Republicans return to special session, dead set on carving up the Kansas City congressional district, dividing and diluting Democratic voters into three pieces, giving Republicans a significant advantage and increased odds to pick up an extra seat in the contentious midterms. How Democrats are fighting back, what else could come up in this special session, and how that could affect your voice and your vote. Plus, if this all ends up in court, a retired Supreme Court justice is on the record to analyze how that fight could shake out. It's all coming up right now. Representative, thanks for joining us here. I know it's a busy week, a lot going on. Missouri voters have enjoyed a privilege that voters in every state don't enjoy, which is the ability to directly change the law or directly change the Constitution. Why do you think that pathway should be more narrow?
I don't believe it should be easier for people outside of the building to get something both placed on the ballot and passed than it is for our representatives, the ones that we elect, the people that we have sent there in a representative government.
Whichever way you cut it, you're attempting to put more obstacles between the voter beginning the process and the law or the amendment being added. Let me read you a quote from one of your colleagues.
Sure.
Representative Scott Cupps of Shell Knob, a Republican, to the Post-Dispatch, he's quoted saying, "You think this is fun for us? They put us in this position to counter what they started. We didn't ask for this fight, but here we are. As a state that has a majority that is very, very conservative, it is not our duty to make sure the minority has a voice." Do you agree with that?
Well, I think, I won't speak for my colleague, but I think I would have framed it a little bit differently than them. Obviously, everybody down here in the Capitol in our state has a voice, but how legally we adjust our statutes and our Constitution is important. And I think specifically over the last 20 years, these measures have come up much more frequently and they're much larger. And just as a base, kind of foundation for me, I don't believe that a private industry should use our Constitution to regulate themselves.
Gambling.
Gambling, marijuana, abortion is an industry. It's a private, money is made in that. We can name several of them. I mean, even...
Didn't they only do that because the legislature didn't act first?
I think... What comes first, the cart or the horse? I think the process...
The legislature could have regulated marijuana, could have regulated gambling, but didn't.
That's correct, and that's the process we're in as a state always. We're in a representative government. Our representatives, sometimes it is extremely difficult down here to build a consensus on a particular issue.
I want to ask you about something more direct, which is going to be on your desk very likely in the next week or so here. Mm-hmm. Why should Missouri Republicans play partisan hardball in Kansas City? Isn't a 6-2 map already really leaning in favor of Republicans?
I think the way that you frame that is already in a negative position. I'd like to take it back
that's an objective statement.
Kind of the three places that I look at on a map. And once again, I told you before we started, I'm a youth pastor by trade. So this process of learning these different types of issues, and especially on the mapping issue, I think there's pretty good consensus around the things that are important when it comes to drawing a map. Is there contiguity? Is there compactness? And is there a shared community to the best of your ability?
And obviously, in this map, is there a Democrat in Kansas City?
Obviously, I think that's a fair question. I think that the map, the process of it is always going to be political. I'm looking at it from a much more technical standpoint. Does the map achieve those three goals in general?
Okay, good.
And does it make sense? Is
it's
the
a political
people together?
Issue, it's a technical issue, but
That's
it's also
right.
a timing issue. Why now?
Well, I think the timing is because our governor asked us to deal with the issue.
But what numbers are you going to use? The census is 6 years old.
I think the process of what you said about why is important, and that's always the question. I don't always get a chance to handle the bills that I want to handle or the issue that I want to handle down here. Sometimes issues come to us as legislators. I can tell you out of the two things that we're dealing with in this particular special session, I'm more excited about IP reform because I've invested myself in that in the Elections Committee. But our governor has asked us to consider this. But if it's here, it's here. I've got to vote on it. And those are the three layers that I'm going to be looking at.
I guess I wonder about the politics and the optics of it. Do you have a concern that this might send a subconscious signal to voters that Republicans are running away from the backlash of their bad ideas?
Yeah, I don't view it that way. I can't if I'm going to look at this issue objectively. I have to look at the map that's in front of me, and in a real technical sense, I have to make a determination if I believe that it meets those criteria. And certainly even the map that's been drawn, I feel like meets those requirements. Will I vote for it? We'll have to wait and see. But I think the idea that the map has been gerrymandered, or that the map doesn't present a compact, contiguous communities of interest to the best. I mean, some of those cities are large, as you know.
But I mean, it's cracking Kansas City into 3 big pieces.
And I think
that's not compact and contiguous. The rest of the state
Sure,
is.
we can make an argument about one city, but overall the map has less cities divided and less municipalities divided. So if you're going to make an argument on a particular city, you might be able to make that in Kansas City, but there's some other cities now that are kept together. And so that process overall,
Columbia is also cut in half.
Yeah, it's a technical situation. It's always political.
It just happens to be where all the Democrats live.
Yeah, I'm not running away from that. I think the idea that the other party wouldn't draw maps that were favorable to them, I think is a pretty weak argument. I think we see that around the United States.
They certainly do in Illinois.
Yeah, right. It is what it is. It is a political process, and according to the Constitution, it's been reserved to the states. We have control over that.
Representative Bannerman, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Representative Bosley, thanks for joining us outside your office here. Why are we here?
That is a really good question. I wish that I wouldn't have to say this, but we're here because a corrupt regime of Republicans want to overturn access for people in the state of Missouri, as well as dilute the representation of black and brown congressfolk here in Missouri too.
How fair would you say the current 6-2 congressional map is in Missouri?
I don't think it's fair at all. Missouri is a very purple state. In all honesty, Missouri is more of a 5-3 kind of state than it is a 6-2.
The Supreme Court, though, has said in years past, even under a more liberal majority than the one that exists today, the more conservative lean on the Supreme Court, that political maps are inherently political, and that you're allowed to, voters might not like how it feels, but you're allowed to flex a partisan majority to help your party out. So what's wrong with Republicans doing this?
I mean, when Democrats had control, we didn't do that, and some have made the argument, well, they do it in California, or
in Illinois,
they do it in Illinois. And I think the important piece to that is we're not cracking and packing and dividing people based on not just politics, but also on race. A lot of this has to do with race, because majority of the areas that they're unpacking and they're trying to pack into rural communities are densely populated with minority folk.
I don't understand all the law and math that goes into that. I've read about it. But Congressman Cleaver himself told us on this program that the Kansas City district, right now the 5th congressional district in Missouri, is not protected by the Voting Rights Act.
No.
Because while it may have 23% composition of black voters, it's not high enough to meet that threshold.
Yeah.
So how do you, if you can't win on that legal argument, do you even trust that the Supreme Court would honor the old metrics?
I think
they threw out affirmative action, for example.
they threw out affirmative action, what's left of the Voting Rights Act. I think that we can say right now that the U.S. Supreme Court is bought and paid for by Donald Trump and the Republican Party. So at this point, we're seeing our Constitution being eroded left and right. But I think it's also important to note that we're seeing things like in Mississippi, where the Supreme Court said, yeah, no, you cannot have partisan and race gerrymandering of districts. So now you have to create black districts in Mississippi. So I don't think that it is something that is happening, or we should give up the fight of saying there is a legal argument here, because it is in Missouri. And I think that, our Missouri Supreme Court it has been a staunch advocate of making sure that they look at the law holistically and in its fullness, and not just looking at it in partisanship.
Do Democrats have a chance of defeating this gerrymandered map?
The people have the chance to defeat this map. Democrat, Republican, right now, people are feeling very defeated.
If they do what?
If they sit out and get out and vote. When you don't get out to vote, this is what happens.
I read your open letter to Governor Kehoe, and they included a lot of gospel scripture.
Yeah.
What were you trying to convey, or to what were you trying to appeal in that? Was that a strategy?
Well, listen, it's funny that you say that. After I wrote it and I read it, I was like, oh my goodness, I've turned into like one of my old lady church women. And it resonated with me so much because I leaned on that counsel growing up and kind of understanding where the governor is in his religion and being Catholic. I think it's also important to give the view of saying, look, we both believe in scripture, we both believe in God. So at some point we have to lean on God's understanding and not our own. And I think that is important to note there too. Sometimes you can try to appeal to a person's heart and it may not work, but one thing that I do know that we can do is that we can legislate in some way, like Martin Luther King said, we can legislate to make sure that the lyncher cannot lynch. And I think that that is important right now, of making sure that Governor Kehoe sees all people of Missouri as just that, people.
When he advocated or defended his position on moving forward with this gerrymandered map, he said he wanted the Speaker of the House in Washington to represent Missouri values. Do you have concerns that Democrats in D.C. have gone too far, that have alienated or created this political position that Governor Kehoe is now addressing?
No, Democrats haven't gone far enough, right? People need right now, the reason why Donald Trump is such a hot commodity is because he's a reality TV star. Like, let's be clear. He brings the attention, he brings the noise, he gets people riled up. And I think that Kehoe bending over to the will of Donald Trump is also a problem too. We need somebody who is, and I'm a St. Louisan through and through, I don't believe in bowing down to anybody because the only person that I'm beholden to is God himself.
I wish we had more time. I know you have a committee to get to and a lot of debate in the week ahead. Thank you for your time.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
One of the fundamental battle cries of a more ethical election process is that voters should get to pick their politicians, not the other way around. So anytime politicians start cracking open a congressional map, especially in the middle of a decade, to do just that, you can almost guarantee that effort will end up in court. If it does here in Missouri, it's likely to find its way to the Missouri Supreme Court. So our next guest, joining us now on the record, is retired Missouri Supreme Court Judge Michael Wolf from our KSDK studios in St. Louis. Judge, it's an honor to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here. Thank you.
We heard some Democrats protest the very gathering and convening of this special session, arguing that there wasn't a quorum. There weren't enough politicians here to officially gavel in. If this special session really started without a quorum, are all the laws they pass here vulnerable to being struck down, or is that really more of a technicality?
I think that's something for the legislature to decide whether or not they have a quorum. I think courts typically defer to that, but they might have a serious objection.
On the initiative petition reform, we're hearing that Republicans want to force a majority vote in every county. Would that flat out violate the one person, one vote rule and how voters have had a chance to influence state laws or the state constitution?
It may. I've not seen anybody try that before, because what it means is that the voters in some districts will have more weight to their votes than people in other districts. So that certainly is a legal problem. But the real problem they have is in getting the voters to approve a diminution of the voters' opportunities to change the Constitution and change the laws by the initiative process. So they may have more of a political problem than a legal problem.
And if the legal problem does venture into that equal protection territory, does the constitutional venue, is it more, should it be argued in state court or federal?
Either way, if it's a one person, one vote challenge, that really comes up under the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. It could be in state court, it could be in federal court.
And on precedent, have you ever seen courts uphold an action like this before?
I've never seen an action like this before.
Do you see courts stepping in on this or brushing it off as mere politics?
Well, the Missouri Constitution has a number of provisions that are kind of guidelines to how the legislature conducts its business. So unlike the federal courts, which are reluctant to get into the details of legislating, our Constitution basically invites that.
You're one of so few people who could have this perspective, but do the judges who wear those black robes feel some reluctance to wade into these overtly partisan waters?
I think that people are respectful of the fact that there is a political sphere and there's a sphere of law. And the two intersect in the Missouri Constitution. For example, a statute, a bill, is required to have a single subject and a title that describes the subject. We don't have that in the federal system, but the court ends up being the enforcer of that. And so there you'll find legislative enactments being struck down by the courts where the courts feel that principle has been violated. So we do have much more intrusion into the legislative process in state courts than we do by having the federal courts supervising what the United States Congress does.
And I guess I'm asking you to offer an opinion here, but do you see a ripple effect happening if Missouri is able to change the voter participation in this state? Could you see that door opening in states across the country?
Well, there's about 30 states that have the initiative process. And most of them are states that are not southern or border states like Missouri. And so many of them that have these provisions are pretty protective of the opportunity of the citizens to change their constitution and change their laws by direct democracy. And so I think that it's not likely to have a ripple effect. Every state has its own culture with respect to that particular avenue for the citizens. Some have no avenue for the citizens. Some have a fairly robust avenue, which we do.
We're very glad to have you join us. When we come back, we go from state politics back to local and check the record on something a lot closer to home. We're back in a moment. We have much more of our conversation with former Missouri Supreme Court Judge Michael Wolff up on KSDK.com. You can also catch it streaming free on the 5+ app. Five months ago, St. Louis County Executive Sam Page didn't have a doubt in his mind. He gave one of the most confident answers I've ever seen a politician give to this question.
Do you plan to seek re-election?
Yes.
Instant answer, no delay. Then a new wrinkle, just 3 months down the road, when a grand jury agreed to indict Page on the Attorney General's allegations that he stole money to pay for county educational mailer postcards that would help educate voters about that ballot question, Prop B. So let's check the record. At the heart of that mailer was whether or not the county council could fire Page's cabinet members, like, for example, maybe his lawyer, Dana Redwing. She was, after all, the one who secretly recorded the phone call with Dennis Hancock and moved to have him expelled from his seat on the county council. So some saw the Prop B push as the politics of revenge. Page's mailer certainly leaned heavily in opposition of that ballot question, in defense of his own control over his cabinet picks, and a court may still have to decide if he crossed that misdemeanor line of improper language on the public mailer, or if he crossed that higher felony line of stealing public funds to do it. But all those new legal questions seem to give Page at least a bit of pause when faced with that very same question just this week. Take a listen.
I always make plans to run for re-election, as I have 2 times before, so I'm always planning. I don't make a commitment or an announcement until the end of the year before, and that's what I've always done, and that's what I'm going to do this time.
But how does that legal headache complicate your thought process?
You know, it is what it is. I don't think I did anything wrong, and most people who look at this don't think so either. I'm going to continue doing the work of the county, and there will be a time when I can talk about it, but it's not now.
5 months ago, Page's answer was an immediate and unwavering yes. Now it's an I don't make a commitment just yet. Is the county executive wavering? We'll stay tuned. That's it for us this week from Jefferson City. Until next time, we're off the record.